Good evening, everybody. It's time for our Q&A session with David Book. I see people are bouncing in, and I'm going to unmute each of you as you come in. But what I need you to do on your end is go ahead and mute your microphone. And then when you're called on, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. You can also post questions via the chat window. If you want to get our attention, just raise your hand. Use the raise your hand feature, and we'll be happy to.
You gotta stick to your word. Like when you say something to a buddy, what are you gonna do? Lie to your buddy?
Hello, hello. I found the offending party there. So
something going on.
I guess these webinars aren't as formal as they used to be in the beginning days, right? Something like that. In any case, it's time to turn over the screen and the microphone to David Book. So David, take it away.
So hi, gang. Hopefully you had a nice day. It's started to pour down rain here in Monterey, so I'm a little bit kind of bundled up. And if we had a way to all of us screen share or camera share, I think you'd laugh at my winter coat. I'm especially saying that for my friend Jim, Jim King, who's in our hangout tonight. He'd laugh at me talking about being cold. He's probably like 10 degrees tonight. I have no idea. And Susan, the same thing, right? So up there in the midwestern northern part of the country where it's freezing. But yeah, we've done a lot of these Q&A get-togethers. It's just a casual hangout. It gives everybody an opportunity to ask some questions, and it generally turns into just a kind of a longer dialogue about different topics and all that kind of stuff. We had a webinar yesterday that we covered some news and announcements, and we probably created a bunch of questions from that, so that's fine if you want to talk about some of those things. We've got some future webinars coming up with specific topics related to some of these new features and some specific topics related to welcoming new users and all that kind of stuff. So with that, good evening. Let's hang out for a bit. Warren, I don't remember, do we have 60 minutes or 90 minutes?
We've got 90 minutes tonight.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so you guys are welcome to stick around the whole time or not the whole time or whatever. I'll definitely be with you that whole time. And with that, let's get the hands going. I'm sure that we have some questions waiting to be answered. So if you've got a question, go for it. I don't see the little hand raising thing on my end, so I think Warren probably does.
Well, I see the hand raising thing, but I don't see it yet. So
okay.
Let me just start out with a question related to push notifications. I know you're getting bombarded with it, but let me just ask the question again. How soon do you anticipate push notification, and will that only be for members versus guests?
Yeah, so that'll be a member-only thing because of the cost that we incur in running that back end, and so we were talking about this yesterday in the webinar, and the goal is to get that on the buzztouch.com site first, and then integrate it into the next release of the open source package, which is actually, or the self-hosted package, which is actually done and working in the self-hosted panel. But I don't want to get that. I don't want people to start installing that and asking all the questions related to that until we get it working on the Buzztouch site. And so the goal is, end of next week is kind of what I've been throwing around. I was working on it all day today, and there's a lot of complexities related to just kind of how it works. And a lot of things that people don't realize is, there's a lot of different parts to it. You've got the source code in the application itself. You've got the source code in the control panel. You've got the source code in the push notification server, which, you guys don't see. And there's just a lot of parts. And so taking it step by step, and I'm happy with the progress so far. It could be sooner than that, depending on really a lot of our development and our rollout here depends on kind of the state of things each day, right? We get questions about past things that we need to kind of button up and fix, and of course that takes us away from new things, but that's kind of the goal there. That's a good question. I get
related to
that,
David, did you wind up having to build your own push notification server, or are you working with some other back end?
Repeat that, please. I didn't hear the first part.
Did you wind up having to set up your own push notification server or service, or are you using somebody else for that?
Yeah, there's two parts to that question. That's a great question. And so the answer is yeah, we've set up a whole back-end environment to support pushing messages out for application owners that use Buzztouch in volume, right? So that's one piece of the puzzle. And then the other piece of the puzzle that we hit on a little bit yesterday, and people who have tried to do push notifications before may already understand, and that is we don't push, you and I, application owners, we don't push messages directly to devices. We push them to Apple or we push them to Google. And then Apple or Google actually handles delivering them to the devices. So the back end that I've set up and the infrastructure that we're going to let our members use handles that relationship between Apple and your database. And so the control panel allows you to send the message. You're adding that to a queue in our back end, or in the case of a self-hosted customer, you'll be adding it to your own database. And then your software pushes that, your self-hosted software or your Buzztouch.com control panel pushes that to Apple or pushes that to Google, where it's then forwarded on to the devices. So that's a great question. In fact, let me show you again. Oh, I don't have it available, so I can't really show it to you. But yeah, so it's a pretty simple process. The thing that I get excited about is not the simple push, which is kind of phase one, where we'll just be sending little simple text messages and setting the badge number on the iOS devices. But I get excited about the possibilities that this opens up. And some of you have heard me talk about this. You hear this term rich push notifications or magic push notifications. I can imagine a time where, version 2, version 3, version 4, things like that of our push system allows our end users to configure more sophisticated, beautiful, rich, feature-rich push notifications. An example might be you push a message out, and when the user taps the button, they might see a video, or they might, hear a song, or they might, see a document or something like that, which is a little bit more sophisticated than just saying, hey, you have a message. And so phase one is the simple approach, hey, you have a message, which we're all used to. And then phase 2 will be, or 2 or 3, or down the road, I should say, extending that idea and allowing it for be, a little bit more complicated, a little bit more fun, I should say. But we have to constantly be mindful of the more complex it is, oftentimes the more difficult it is to understand and the more difficult it is to take advantage of. And so we don't want to just throw out crazy complex features that people don't understand. The people in this meeting would probably understand a lot of that stuff, but a lot of people that come to our site and a lot of people that use our software, they're just not prepared for complex things yet. So that's a good question there.
Okay.
Has anybody in this audience already configured push? I'll ask you guys a question and see if we can get some comments. Considered push or configured push in an application that's already out there? I think probably some of you have. I think Chris did. I'm not sure if Susan has or not. These are team members of ours, but they've got apps in the wild. Has anybody done that yet? See if we can get somebody to speak up.
Hey David, it's Jim.
Oh, hi Jim.
Hey, it's a balmy 30 degrees up here, so it's
30.
pretty nice
You probably have your swimsuit on then.
Yeah, short sleeves today. But I actually used Parse's back end to do with an ad hoc app that I have with the sales team, and it's worked out pretty well. It's pretty easy to put together.
So you're probably familiar. So then you must already be familiar with the code that you add to the Objective-C project, your iOS project, that deals with registering the device and then deals with managing those messages as they arrive.
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward, and like you said, registering for the certificates, it's kind of like a developer in the developer's portal,
So a lot of that stuff, the reason I'm asking, and Ian's saying here in the chat window that he uses Appoxee, which is another one of those services. The reason I'm asking that is, we're not, at this stage of the game, we're not trying to, become the best push notification system on the planet, so to speak, but we definitely want to move in that direction so that our users don't have to look to those other services and integrate yet one more thing into their app. And so depending on the sophistication that some of those other tools offer, our initial offering of this may be satisfactory or may not be, right? You might not want to use our push system until it matures to the point that it does, some of that magic stuff that some of those other ones do already, and so which is fine. But it's all just a process. I know Warren experimented a little bit with Parse, I believe, and had a little bit of trouble in some technical stuff, and really didn't have much luck getting it going. And I do fear that there is going to be a certain amount of learning going on our end from our audience in, as much as we try to make it as easy as we possibly can. There are some complexities involved with it, so I'm a little bit anxious about that, but we'll just have to get through it, and we'll learn with the audience and make it easier and more reliable as we go. So that's kind of cool. I want to know why, or not why, but I want to know when Apple and Google will allow us to push larger amounts of data to these devices using the push system. And I say that because it seems logical to me. As it stands right now, there's some limitations, some pretty short limitations on what you can send to the device. And for example, 250 characters or something is the length of the message that you can send, which is actually too much information in terms of a push. You don't want to send them a whole, crazy long letter that pops up on their screen, for example. But it would be nice to be able to send data along with the push notification message, along with the little bundle of information, which would allow us developers to do a lot more creative things. So typically what ends up happening now in those more sophisticated approaches, like I've talked about, like Magic Push and all that, is you just send maybe a product ID or a message ID along so that you know how to behave, how your app should behave when the user taps on the message. But the problem with that is you have to know in advance that your application is prepared to execute the instruction that you're planning on triggering, and I don't think that's as dynamic as it could be. I think it makes sense that in the future they would allow us developers to, like I said, bundle up some more sophisticated stuff. And so we'll see if that ever comes true or not. It may not. But on the other hand, Apple isn't directly charging us, and Google isn't directly charging us to get to the devices. So it might not be something that we see very soon. Jim's saying, yeah, passbook push would be way cool. I agree 100%. Wouldn't it be cool if you could push a ticket to a phone, or push an invitation or something, something rich. But that's a little bit more complex than maybe most people understand, but that's all right. Kind of the way it works now is, let's say that you have a screen in your app that is, a special announcement or something, or a landing page. Really all you can do is send a push with a token or an ID to that landing page, so that when the user taps OK on the message, the app launches directly to a particular landing spot in the app. And that does work, but the limit with that, of course, is the app has to be prepared to know that that has to exist when you compile the app. And that's kind of my beef with it. But I'm a creative guy, and I always, to me, there's always a better way to do everything, which is interesting. So so Warren threw that push question out there, which is a good one. Started a little dialogue. Do we have any other questions from the gang? I don't see any. Maybe we'll have a sleepy night of 90 minutes, just crickets in here.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
I'll ask a question.
Oh, hi, Chris.
How's it going?
Good.
Hey, I think I probably already know the answer to this, but is there anything on the Buzztouch side that can make the whole connecting to Facebook any easier? Because I've logged in and done the Facebook developer thing for some clients, and it's just an absolute mess. And the few times I did get it working, it seems like a month later they start saying, "Hey, you need to disable this," and then stop these changes, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
October 2013. Is there anything on the Buzztouch side that makes that any easier, or is it all just their headache?
No, that's a great question, and let me show you something that I installed the other day. You guys can still see my screen. I'm going to rephrase what Chris just said, and what Chris said is adding the Facebook SDK to my app right now is a pain in the butt, and it should be easier, and I couldn't agree more. And so one of the reasons that that's challenging, if you guys remember way back, in some of the previous versions of our releases, we included the Facebook SDK in the app, in the source code. We stopped doing that for a few reasons. Let me open up a project here. How about I open up this Remember Together app, which I've been working on. I'll get you guys all excited with this one. You guys remember the Applits announcement? The Remember Together app. Here, I'll go ahead and launch it. It's pretty cool. The Remember Together app, this is kind of a sneak peek of what I've been working on. This is the Applits contest winner that will be out here in, I don't know, 3 weeks or so. And it has the Facebook integration. And so I'm going to show you in the Xcode project what I had to add. And it's down here in Frameworks. And you'll see that there's a Frameworks resources bundle. And then there's a framework, you know, Facebook SDK.framework. And then there's a social framework. So the answer is right now you all know that nothing from Facebook is automatically arriving in your downloaded packages. We could, I believe that we could include the Facebook SDK in the download that we give you, but the terms of service on their site seem to have changed. And the reason that we no longer include it in the build is I'm not comfortable with doing that without, I don't quite understand their terms of service like they used to read. It was very obvious that I could do that. Well, now the terms have changed, and what they want you to do is install a piece of software, you know, yourself as the app owner. So I think ideally what we will do is make an agreement with Facebook. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had an official relationship with them and they allowed us to distribute that stuff, but we're not there yet. Same thing with the Twitter SDK, right? Their rules changed. I see Niraj is asking a question too, so let me get back to that real quick. But so the Remember Together app, if I close this, I want to show you what I'm working on. So this is a Buzztouch app, and I'll log into it and show you the progress here. It's pretty cool. This is a scrapbooking app, and I'm going to log in and show you just a little sneak peek of what I've been doing. This is kind of cool. And it's got sign up with Facebook and sign up with Twitter built right into it. So this is my list of books. They're blank right now. It's kind of in development, but I can delete these books. And you can see our cool little animation. So you have a library of books, scrapbooks that you would share with your friends. And when you create a new scrapbook, you can add things to your scrapbook from your little library of fun little sticker packs and things like that. And let's say you wanted to make a book with, you know, all kinds of photos and images and text and all that kind of stuff. Then you could do that. And then you would all share, you know, let's add a little panda bear here. You can share with your friends your book. So this thing's kind of cool. And then this is the friends list that kind of exposes itself on the side, which is kind of slick. You can add a friend. And so my library here now, you can see how that works. And then we've got some options here on the left. And you'll notice I built this kind of little hidden menu thing, which is kind of slick. But this is a really cool app. I'm excited to kind of share with everybody how that works. So Facebook, summarizing that, I had to build into this app manually the Facebook Connect stuff. I would love to include it automatically in the download, but I believe that it would be against the spirit of their terms of service today, and so I'm a little bit nervous about that until we actually get official word from them. So, good question. Let's move on to Niraj is asking a question. John, let's get to you first. John, you've got your hand up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good. So, can everybody hear me is the question?
I can hear you well.
Perfect. So my question was in relation to the push notifications, kind of cycling back a little bit, but
Sure.
Like, is the Buzztouch push notification system going to be just pushing out the local notifications, or is there going to be an ability to have the messages come in-app as well, like in case they have the app active or whatever?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so I'm gonna summarize. I'm gonna revisit what you just said and kind of rephrase it, just so some people in our audience can kind of understand. There's a difference between a local push notification and a remote push notification, and the biggest difference is this: a local notification is something that your application, like in your source code here, you as the developer who's writing the source code for the app. I'm going to the app delegate here in this test project. Something that you write and then schedule in, for an advanced date. For example, you could write some code in here or download something from a database and say, show this person a message on January 29th. And then on January 29th, that message would be displayed to the user. So it doesn't come from a remote source necessarily. It's built right in. And you can do those programmatically, maybe based on some behavior inside of the application. You might then schedule something in advance, all within the app, which is kind of cool. What we're talking about is not that concept of local push notifications. We're talking about pushing from a remote server in real time. And so your application has to then be prepared. Let me show you right here. Let me find it, and this is a test app I'm working on. Okay, so you've got 4 methods in the .h file here. You've got 3 methods in the .h file related to push. So they start here and end here in the .h, and this is the interface. I'll show you the implementation in a sec. But you've got one called did register for remote notifications. You've got did fail to register for remote notifications. And then you've got did receive remote notifications. So I'm going to talk about those 3 real fast. So the registering method is when you can't send, and this is just Apple right now. When you send a message to an Apple device, you can't send a message to an Apple device until the user has allowed you to do that. So in the did register for remote notifications method, which is, let me find it here in my implementation file. This method right here is the method that you run to register the device on your back end. So you'll have a device token, and the device token will get sent to a URL, and you see here use URL. This is the register for push URL, which will be in your control panel, which is now in the configuration file, register for push URL. So when the user says, yeah, go ahead and do that, then the first thing that iOS is going to do is it's going to pass along a token, we call it a device token, to this URL or to this back end, and then your back end is going to remember that. And that becomes a device in your list of registered devices. So the next logical question is, how do you trigger iOS to do that? How do you prompt them? So when the application launches, you can tell the application, anywhere you want, really. Most people do it in the app did finish launching method. Hey, trigger that and ask them to register. So once they register, when it's successfully registered, then you get that token back and you deal with it as a developer. When it's unsuccessful, then you act on that. So that's how the device gets registered. But your question is more related to this idea of did receive remote notification. So when your back end or when Apple sends this phone a message, then this method fires, and this is where you handle what to do when you handle that message. And so you set the badge, you play the sound effect, and you show the alert. So hopefully that answers your question, and I'll shorten it by saying our implementation has nothing to do with local notifications and is all about remote notifications. Great question. So I'm going to jump over to Niraj, who was next. Hi, Niraj. Haven't seen you in a while. It's good to see your name in here. What's up?
Well, Niraj is muted at the moment. It says
Niraj is muted.
Yeah.
You turned him off.
Well, I tried to turn him on, but that's.
He's gone. Okay, we'll come back to him then.
Well,
I'm hoping that answered. Niraj is asking.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, Niraj looks like he typed in his question. I have a question on how to modify the menu with header image plugin. So that menu with header image plugin, that's a fine question. How you would modify it, of course, would depend on what you would want to do to it. But if I look at the source code here for the menu with header, we've got two different .h files and 2 different .m files. And depending on what part of it you wanted to modify, I assume you would want to modify the way that it looks or something. You would get into the implementation file and change the layout of the table or the header image height. That's a tough question to answer. Maybe if we can get him on the line, he can ask a little bit more detail. I'm not sure. Susan's asking, is Remember Together on Android? No, that's iOS only. We may implement it in Android, but my agreement with Applits at this stage of the game is we're going to do iOS first and see how they do. There's kind of a longer question there in terms of why not Android. It has to do with their mission and their goals, and they don't want all their stuff on Android for some reason. Ian's asking about this forum post. Ooh, this is a long forum post. Let me look. In fact, his last reply was, "Hey, I'm looking into this further. Check out the webinar." It was very, very helpful. Great job getting this question in front of us. Let's see what this question is, and we'll visit it, and then we'll answer it to, I'll answer it here live and see what happens. So MSTA in Sarasota, Florida is saying, we're working on a second submission of an app that has already been compiled and successfully sent to Apple. When the source code is opened up with no changes from previous version that processed through the same xcode program just 2 weeks ago, the following errors are showing up in xcode. So we've got a pasted group of code here. Any idea in simple terms how to fix these problems? I don't know what problems he's talking about, although I'm assuming this is source code coming from the file manager class. No, it's hard to know where this is actually coming from. File with URL, com.mobile backup. What is he working on here? I'm not sure. Let me think of this from menu. Oh, I know where this is coming from. Yeah, and then let me see what Ian's saying. I know there's some recent changes to the file manager, which is true. Thanks. That's been tried and there's still no luck. We checked xcode program updates and computer updates, and everything is as up to date as possible. Did you resolve this? I have the same problem. I'm on xcode 4.2. Okay, got it. I think I know what's going on. So let me revisit here what everyone's talking about. And this is going to open up a can of worms, and then we'll get back to Niraj's table view question on the menu with image. So I'm going to go to the core part of the project here, the core files, and I'm going to open up File Manager. And this has been, so there's two, the interface file and the implementation file. So the interface file is where we describe all the different methods that we find in the implementation file. So one of the new methods that we added a few weeks ago, and this is surely what, whoops, Safari is where this question is. This is surely what S. Henry in Austin's dealing with, and MSTA, I don't know how to pronounce that, MISTA maybe, that's what they're dealing with. They're saying, hey, a couple of weeks ago it worked and now it doesn't. That makes perfect sense. So we added a couple of methods to this to solve a kind of an ongoing problem that I'll try to explain right now. So there's a new method called mark file as do not back up. This is what was added a couple of weeks ago. So this is where we describe it in the interface, and in the implementation, I'll show you where that is. The mark file as do not back up method is supposed to do a couple of things, but what's important to us is iCloud and iPhone, Apple and iCloud, which didn't exist a while ago when this file manager class was originally written, don't want you as an app developer to automatically back up large files without the user understanding that that's happening. So what ends up happening is when you download a file to the device for, let's say, an image, for example. When you download an image to the device and you save it to the file system, depending on where you save it on the file system, iOS may try to back it up and sync it with iCloud, which is what we're trying to prevent, because it doesn't make any sense to fill up a customer's iCloud account with weird, strange things that were created inside of your app. So what iOS wants us to do and what Apple wants us to do as developers is mark those files as do not back up. So this method does that. So each time a file is downloaded inside of your app with any of these other methods, for example, let me find one here. Nah, that's a bad one. So let me find one I'm looking for. Here we go. So save text file, for example. When we save the text file to the device, the text file might be any number of things. It might be the JSON data for a screen. It might be a web page. It could be anything. And the same thing could be true for binary data, like a PDF or an image or something. So when we save it to the device, what we want to do is we want to mark that file, and this is the new implementation from a couple of weeks ago. We want to mark that file as don't back this up, so iCloud doesn't back it up and then the customer's confused and all that kind of stuff. So the challenge with this method right here, mark do not back up, the challenge with this method is it was not available quite a while ago, And current versions of xcode, like you see how I have 4.5.2, have no problem with it, but older versions of xcode don't necessarily understand what this is. So the kind of the hack way to deal with this, and one way to deal with this, would be to simply take this code like this and comment it out. And what we've done is we've told, oops, I've got a typo here. I'm telling xcode, hey, just ignore all of this because I know, let me find it here. If I just comment all this out, like so, take all this out of here, what we're telling xcode is, don't do any of this stuff because my version of xcode doesn't even understand what this stuff is. The problem with this, let me finish commenting this. Yeah, so I just commented all of this stuff out. And this method expects a return value, so we would just say return true. So if we did that and we just ignored all of this code, xcode should stop yelling at you. Of course, you could just remove it if you want. The problem with that is because you're using an older version of xcode, you're not now complying with the terms and conditions of how iOS and the cloud work. Really what the root of this is you're using an older version of xcode. And unfortunately, Apple does want everyone to be constantly on the newest stuff so that we can all be kind of on the same page. And so that doesn't mean there's not a way to use the older version of xcode and pull this off. It just means that this code is written assuming that you've got the newest version of xcode. So I guess the answer to this is maybe we need to revisit how this method works and see if I can come up with some code that won't cause the compiler to yell and will work with xcode 4.2. Because if you notice, the forum post here talks about xcode 4.2, where I saw that in this post somewhere. Yeah, right here, xcode 4.2. So this person also can't compile for iOS 6, which is another problem. And so the idea here is, you know, truthfully, these two people are going to have trouble into the future submitting apps to the App Store without the latest support for the latest stuff, which is a different problem than what they're asking. So technically, they've got a challenge with their computer recognizing what this stuff means. Specifically, the NSURL is excluded from backup key, doesn't exist in xcode 4.2. So that's a long-winded way to say, yeah, maybe I need to revisit this and figure out how to make this possible with the older version of xcode. And it may be possible. I'll do some research and figure it out. I just don't think that it is at this stage of the game.
So is basically the limitation there that the Mac itself can't be upgraded to the most current version of the operating system and therefore can't run the current version of xcode?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. It's not just not only can they not run the most current version of xcode, but they can't compile apps that are iOS 6 compatible. And as far as I know, iPhone 6, for example, I don't think the market will continue to accept apps that aren't iOS 6 compatible. So I would beg to question, you know, this is one problem that these folks on the forum are having, but there's a whole lot of other problems they're going to have also because they don't have, you know, and I've heard this a few times. It's probably just a matter of spending an hour and doing some searching and research, but I think that there's a lot of people in that boat. I know Mark, Go Northwest, was talking about the same thing because he's got an older Mac, and I'm not sure yet if Apple is forcing people to upgrade to, see, because the challenge is it's not just getting the newest version of xcode. The newest version of xcode won't run on some of the older computers, so it's frustrating. So Chris has got a comment. Maybe he can add some details here. Chris, go ahead, and I think you're probably going to talk about this very thing.
I've got a comment.
I see your hand up, Chris.
I do?
Oh, maybe not. Okay. Yeah, we've got your little flag going, but that's fine. So anyway, so that's a reasonable, unfortunately, that's a challenging, you know, forum post, right? We don't want to just say, sorry, get a newer computer. So the answer right now is going to be, you know, just get rid of all the code here in this method. You got to leave the method and just return true, because everywhere else that it's called in this file, you know, it's triggering this do not mark for backup method. So we're just basically making that blank, and that will solve their xcode errors, but it won't solve a bigger problem. And here's the other frustrating part too, right? This is the crazy part. Not all of the apps that were running the older version of this file manager were being rejected, but some of them were being rejected because we were storing things in the documents directory without marking them do not back up. But only maybe, you know, 5 or 10% of the people submitting would hear that problem. It's very frustrating. You know, there's a lot of inconsistencies in the review process, and I think a lot of us have seen those forum posts. Hey, my app got rejected because I'm backing up to iCloud and I don't mean to. And it's frustrating. But that's just kind of the way it is. None of us have our hands in, you know, Apple's review process, and we can just do the best we can to kind of get through it each time. Looks like Susan has her hand up. Maybe she did that on purpose, unlike Chris. What's up, Susan?
These people must be leaning on their hand-raising button.
Who knows? Maybe she can't hear us. So it's fine. Let's go back to Niraj.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry about that. Front on you.
Right.
A question for Chris, actually. And remember, Chris, you started that program that it was like an exchange program where people could actually try to sell some of their old equipment on your website. It was kind of a way to have Buzztouch kind of get equipment into the hands of people. I wonder if that had any success at all.
You know, a couple people signed up, you know, at the forum to be able to do it, but no one really posted anything.
What was the idea? I vaguely remember something like this.
Well, there's been a lot of people over the years that either couldn't afford new stuff, or you know, like I've got older stuff here that I don't use anymore, and but I don't want to eBay it off or something like that. So it's kind of like an in-house trading market just for Buzztouch members, but you know, it wanted to be separate from the Buzztouch website just for obvious reasons.
Got it. Oh, that's a neat idea. The problem with that is I think most people need the new stuff, and I don't think that people are going to be willing to give up the new stuff. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's possible, and also we've got such a global audience that you know, chances are someone is going to need something that's shipping prohibitive.
Right. That's a good point. It looks like I'm doing a little reading right now. What I want to know is, and back to this forum post that Ian brought up, which is a good forum post. Let me reread this real quick. We're working on a second submission of an app that has already been. We're working on a second submission of an app that's already been compiled and successfully sent to Apple. Okay. Okay, so the following errors are showing up in xcode. What I want to know is, were there errors or was it crashing? There's a difference. And are they errors or are they warnings? I don't have, does anybody that's listening right now have xcode 4.2 running? If you've got xcode 4.2 running, I'd be interested in learning what are the errors that are showing with this method. It's certainly going to be in this mark file as do not backup method. I wonder what the errors are. Is it a warn? If it's a simple warning, well, that's an entirely different question than an error. Yeah, none of this stuff in here except for this key is related to, yeah, it's going to be related to xcode 4.5. I can't see anything else in here. Maybe the set attribute, I'm not sure. I don't have 4.2. Maybe somebody else does. It literally is that simple, right? We need to get this file open on a machine that has 4.2 running so that we can see what the errors are. Or maybe we can get this person that posted to post a screenshot of those messages. Looks like several of them are having them. So it sounds like there's a lot of people on those older platforms, which makes sense if you don't have a machine that'll run 4.5. Does anybody, Chris, do you remember what the requirements are for 4.5 these days? What machine do you have to have? Do you have to have OS,
I think you need at least line. But yeah. I thought they made a version. It's really hard to find, but I thought they made a version of 4.5 for Snow Leopard. But line, to have at least line, you need to have at least a Core 2 Duo processor, So anything 2008, I think, and newer is going to be safe for Lion.
Got it. Got it. But that rules out a lot of Mac Minis and stuff.
Some of the first
MacBook.
Core Solos, yeah.
Yeah, MacBook Pro, iMac, that kind of stuff. So let's I'll post. In fact, one of us, I'm not logged into this browser, but why don't we log in and see if we can get one of these people to post us a screenshot of these messages, and then I'll revisit this method. It would be easy to rewrite if I knew what message they were seeing. And then I'm going to go back to Naraj. Oh, go ahead.
I've got 4.2 here on my laptop. Should I if I just download the newest version of one of my 2.0 apps, I should be able to crank that one out then?
Yeah, that would be great. What I'm looking for is what is the warning that they're seeing in xcode? Is it a warning or an error? And then what is it? What line number is it? And I'm guessing it's this NS URL is excluded from backup, and it's probably preventing them from compiling.
Okay, I'll check that out, and I'll raise my hand when I got an answer.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome. So let's move on to, oh, Ian's saying, hey, can you copy and paste the commented code? Yeah, sure. Naraj, we'll get right back to you. Let's do this. What I'm going to do first, though, Ian, is I'm going to copy this URL to this forum post, and I will load that in Safari. And in Safari, oh no, that's the wrong one. That's Naraj's. Where's the one that we were at before? Here it is. I'll copy and paste it right into this forum post at the end. You guys are seeing how I roll. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this do not backup method and paste this, replace this method in btfilemanager.m, see if the compiler still yells. This will cause some other gotchas I'll address in a bit. The fact is, your machines are not able to compile using the latest iOS SDK, and this will cause other troubles. Okay, so there's the method that'll get rid of their error for sure, but they're going to cause other problems that they may not be aware of what we just talked about, and I'll post some stuff at length about that. Okay, back to Naraj, who says we can hear him now. So let's see what Naraj is up to. What's up?
Hey there. Hi. Good evening. At least you're in the same time zone as me.
I know, huh? Happy LA.
Yeah. So basically, what I want to do is take Susan's fantastic menu header image plugin and replace the header portion of it with two views, which would be let's take it for example. It would be describing a bus stop. So what does a bus stop have? A bus stop has a picture of itself, so I get a context of where it is, does it have a shelter, and so on. And then has a short description about it to the right of the picture. And then the timetable of the bus stop itself would be underneath the header.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so I would want to modify the plugin accordingly. Do I use zip files or programmatically?
Yeah, I would do that. I would do that programmatically, and let me, just because I am familiar with the way her plugin works, and I know that it doesn't already have any layout files in it. So because of that, it'll probably be easier just to do it in code. But let me draw something on the screen real quick, and let's confirm that we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about. So here's just a blank canvas that I'm going to use to draw some stuff. So let's say that you have, let me move my little GoToWebinar panel here. You know, does anybody, this GoToWebinar panel is kind of a pain sometimes. It gets in my way.
You're welcome.
Let's say that you have, you know, a menu like this. And let me change this so we have a no background color. We'll put a black border around it so we can kind of know what we're talking about. So let's say we have a menu and it's got, you know, a bunch of rows. So we've got a row like this, and we'll copy that and paste it a bunch of times. So we've got you guys get the idea here. We got a menu, and we've got whatever, a bunch of rows like this. So there's our menu. And up here in the top area, we have a picture. And so I think what Naraz said, and jump in if I'm wrong, let's make sure that we're kind of talking in the same thing. Maybe two areas in this top section. The left would hold an image and the right would hold maybe some text or a description or something. Do I have that right?
Yeah, and then maybe the text is coming from the what you see, what you get section, or editor rather, on the Buzztouch control panel.
Yeah, okay. So that would be like part 2, and that makes sense. So let's add a little bit of text. So the text would be, this would be, this is the stop description or something.
Exactly.
Right. Just a bunch of text. And then on the right here, maybe this is a picture, and who knows? Let's insert a picture just for fun. So we'll import, I don't know, let me open up. We'll put me there. And we'll put the Buzztouch logo there just for fun. Maybe we have a graphic like this. It's bigger, smaller, whatever. But the point is the same. Maybe this picture's centered or something. I don't know. Can we make this bigger without ruining it? You guys get the idea. Okay, so 2 questions. How do we do the layout, and then how do we get the data? So you said, maybe the text should come from the control panel, and you might also want to control the image from the control panel. Makes perfect sense. So if this is the goal, let's visit the plugin file and see what we could do with this. So the plugin file, oh, and by the way, the plugin file right now doesn't have any of this stuff. All it has is, let me do this real quick. All it has is kind of a placeholder for one big image that looks, it's in the center. And then, of course, it's the whole rectangle there. But it's got one little, we call that a box. I call that a box. So let's remove that thing and just kind of go back to the basics and talk about real quick what a table in iOS is, what parts it's made up of. So we've got the top of the table up here above, and then we've got the bottom of the table, and then you've got the actual rows that scroll. So knowing that, when we look at the menu image.m file, you'll see here in the view did load is where we do this layout. And if I go too fast, just slow me down. It's completely okay. And as long as we don't get any more questions thrown at us, we can kind of visit this for a while. In the layout, we've got an area where we build the table view. And I can tell you that just by looking at this code, we're saying, hey, build a table view here, but don't do it with 50 lines of code. Go ahead and use the view utilities class to get us this table. So it's triggering a method called getTableViewForScreen, and it returns a table that's full size. So the table goes from the top left of the screen all the way down to the bottom left of the screen, and it's full width. And I just know that. Now, we could change the size of this table in code if we wanted, but I'm just establishing the baseline. And then if our control panel has prevent scrolling set, then we tell iOS, hey, don't let the table scroll. Excuse me. And then we say, hey, if this is an iPad, then the image, our header image up here in this box, is going to be this high and this wide. And then the table height is also going to change if this is an iPad, because it's a different size device. If it's not an iPad, then the size of it's going to be right here. So after we establish the size of the image on the header, which we have 150 by 320, then we actually create and construct a UI image view, which is in essence a box. Right here, we plop a box on the screen. We call that a UI image view. That's iOS's word for it. It's just a box. And that UI image view is going to start, X is going to be 0, so top left, Y is going to be 0. And then so this is X and Y, these 4 values right here, number, 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 are going to be the X, Y, width, and height. So we're basically saying that this box that we're going to put an image in is going to start in the top left-hand corner of our screen, and it's going to be this wide and this high, which we calculated here whether it was an iPad or an iPhone. So it's either going to be 150 high or 360 high, and it's either going to be 320 wide or 768 wide. So this is what's happening. So we create an image view, and then the image itself, right here, UI image, that we add to the image view comes from a couple of different places, right? It might come from the cache, it might come from the file system, it might come from a URL, but this is the logic here where we actually find the image, and then after we find the image, we add the image to this image view. After we've added the image to the view, we add the whole thing, this whole box up here that's got the image in it, to the screen, or the self.view, add subview, my table view. Okay, so at that point, and this is where it starts getting a little bit crazy. I'm going to have you ignore this for just a second. At that point, based on our example, we'd have a little bit of a problem if we didn't do anything else. And that problem would be, let me add a picture here up here. I'm going to add, do I have a picture of me somewhere? A bigger picture? What is, oh, we'll add our Minnesota picture. This is our little Minnesota meetup. Susan will appreciate this. And Jim, I don't think was Jim? Yeah, Jim was here that night. Jim's in the meeting here. So this picture right here, we're going to have a problem. I'm going to size this, and I'll show you the problem. It's going to be lame, but you'll get the idea. So this picture, which I'm getting ready to make all blurry, we stuck it on the screen. But remember, our table starts at the top left corner of the screen, so we put that picture over our rows. Because these rows, if you remember when we looked at that source code, oops, these rows were starting on the top left, so our picture would overlay them. So we need to move all these rows down the screen. We need to move the table to right here instead of right here. I hope that makes sense. So in order to do that, we have to take, see right here we add the table to the screen, but then we adjust the frame of the table. See where it says set frame? And we move it down so our zero value is still, our left value is still 0, our x, but our y moves down the screen the same height as the image, so our table starts here. So that's an important concept. People used to email me all the time, and they'd say, my rows are behind my picture. And it's like, well, you need to move the table down. So that's what this image height is for. Okay, so knowing all of that, that's how this is working right now. The way I would do this is I would take these values, and I would use them, these variables, the height and the width, because you still want to remember the height and the width of your new box. And then I would take this header image, and I would just remove it. So we have no header image. And now we're going to add our own, right? So I'm going to paste this back. You could comment it out instead of removing it. What you're going to do is I'm hearing three different things. The first thing we're going to want to do is maybe make this box that we're going to then add two other boxes too, one on the left and one on the right, an image view on the left and like a text view on the right. So instead of making an image view that's this size, let's just make a regular UI view. We'll call it box equals, right? So here's a trick. Just copy this. Instead of saying this is an image view, we're going to say it's a UI image view, and we got to give it a name. And we're going to say make a view, call it box, allocate some memory for it, initialize it with a frame, 0, 0 with height. So now we have a box right here. Now in that box, we need another two boxes. We need maybe a left box and a right box. This is just an example. And the left box would probably be on the left corner here. We'll say, what, I'm not going to do the math to calculate the width, but basically it would be, well, we can do the math. It's the whole width divided by 2. So it's going to be x0, y0, and it's going to be image width divided by 2. Right? That makes sense. Now we have 2 boxes, one on the left and one on the right. And now instead of adding the left box to the screen and the right box to the screen, I would just add these to this box. Right now, these are just 3 things. They don't have any knowledge of each other. So our box, we're going to add subview, left box. And then our box will add subview, right box. Right? So now all these 2 things are inside of this thing. And now we got to add box to the screen. So self.view, add subview, box. And we just did the exact same thing as adding this header image. So instead of adding the header image subview, we added this box, which right now is empty. So if I was doing this, I would probably temporarily set the background color of the box to something like, I don't know, yellow or red or something like that, so I could see it on the screen while I developed, and then I can remove this when I was done. But I generally like to give things colors so I can see them on the screen. When you're not using Interface Builder, we'll set the left box to red. When you're not using Interface Builder, it's sometimes hard to visualize what you're dealing with. We'll make the right box blue. Now you've got 3 boxes. The red one, oops, the yellow one, the red one, and the blue one. The red and the blue are inside the yellow, and they don't have any content yet. So we get a little more creative here. We know that the left one, we just made a generic view, a box. We don't want a generic view. We want a picture there. So let's make it an image view instead of a generic view. All I did was just change the type of object from UI view to UI image view. And now we need an image to put in the box. We'll use the same logic we used before. Temporary image, image file name, image URL, right? I'm just copying this. Instead of adding this image to the header that Susan made, we'll add it to our left box, which is an image view. So left box, which is an image view, set image. And we called this thing temp image, and that came from the control panel's file name and URL. So that's how I would manage the left image. So we'll leave that. And then our right box, we need some comments here. Right box holds text. Left box holds image. Box holds image on left and text on right. So what kind of text do we want? We probably want it to be, you know, scrollable, length, all that kind of stuff. There's a few different kind of text objects you can use. But instead of the right box being a UI view, remember when we changed the left box from a UI view to a UI image view? We're going to do the same thing here. Instead of the right box being a UI view, we'll do a UI text view. Instead, it's just a different kind of object. Here's the size of it. And then in the generic way, we'll say right box, set text. This is the text in the right box. So that's a generic way to do what we just talked about in 10 minutes, right? We're going to have a picture on the left. We're going to have some text on the right. Now, the last part of this, I'm sure there's many more, like does it scroll, does it pan, does it zoom? There's all kinds of things like that. But in a basic sense, this is hard-coded now in our Xcode project. It's not in the JSON data. So Niraj asked, how do we add JSON data to this text box using the control panel? So let's go to one of my apps here, and I'll just give you an example of a trick. This is thanks to Chris. Stowe brought this up, this feature, which is really cool. If we look at a menu with image plugin right now, do I have one on this screen? No, let me make one. Menu with image. Let's add a menu with image so that we can see the properties, and this is just a little test app. So our menu with image, we would set the image right here, and we would set the there's nowhere to set the text, right? So we could use the same settings that Susan's using for the left image, but we don't have anywhere to set the text. So how could we do that? Well, since we don't have any generic way to enter text in this, why don't we go to our theme and use a little trick? Because we can do anything we want in our theme. It introduced advanced manual JSON data. We could do something like right side text for menu. This is the right side text of a menu, right? We could just add a property and a value to our JSON data in the theme, which is kind of a trick. It's kind of slick. So we can save that. And now we know that our data is going to contain this in our control panel. So we can get this value from the theme and insert it right here. So how do we know what that value is? So let's make a string out of it. And a string value for text box. We'll just say equals nothing right now. Typo there. We'll just assume that it equals nothing. I'm going to copy the name of my key here that I pasted from the control panel, or that I copied from the control panel, so I don't make a typo. And I'm not going to type this by hand because I want to show you how we do it. How do we get the value for that theme? I mean, from the theme, right? How do we get this properties value from the app's global theme? There's a couple different ways to do it. Let's see if I can type this and not lose you. So we'll say instead of it equaling nothing, let's say we'll use the strings class, get style value for screen, and you'll notice that it's going to take three things. It's going to take some screen data, the data of the screen we're on. It's going to take the name of the string, the theme property we're looking for, and then a default value. And this is just xcode giving us hints. Now I would know that by going to my core properties, looking at strings, BT strings. Where is it? It's in here somewhere. There it is. So get style value for string or for screen. I'm going to copy that. So just have a little cheat sheet. Put this right here so I can see the parameters. So it's going to take the parent screen data. Okay, that's cool. So we're going to add to this self.screenData. It's going to take the name of the property we want. So we want right side text for menu. And then it's going to take a default value. No text found. No text found. And that's just if it doesn't include it. What are we going to put there? Is it blank or something like that? So this thing here we'll add right here instead of our hard-coded value. I got a typo in here somewhere. Let me find it. BT strings get style value for screen data.
David, the typo is in get style value for screen. So I'll go back. There you go. There's an R in there. And screen get style value for screen.
Well done. You're a ninja. You must have like a giant monitor. Good job. So anyway, so we can just use a built-in method to pull this property from the theme, which is going to be this. So that's just one way to do this. I can think of a bunch of ways, but this is just one way. So we have the text that's dynamic and driven from a control panel. We made a box that's a UI text view. Then we set the text of that box to this value. We could have easily just not allocated any memory for that variable right there and just done this, but I tried to make it a little bit easier to understand. So hopefully that helps you and that helps you get a little bit creative. And we didn't use Interface Builder for any of that stuff. This is just logic, right? We created 3 objects. It might not have been logical because you've never done it before, but hopefully that'll shed some light on it. I'm going to, how can I share this? I wonder what the easiest way to share this would be. Well, you can just pause the video. Watch Warren's recording of the video and then just pause it, and it'll just show you that stuff. So sorry about the delay there, my SPS. You've got a question. Let's take hers next. Maybe she can't hear us or he can't hear.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
She can't hear us or he can't hear. Oh, this is a
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, you can hear me. Okay. So I had a couple of questions. We were talking about the devices, different devices. I need an Android phone or something to test on. What do you guys recommend?
I'm sure you're gonna get a bunch of opinions on this. I would go on Nexus 7 for now.
Nexus 7. Okay.
Which is a tablet. It's a small little tablet, but you don't need a contract.
Okay, so I don't need a phone. It's not necessary to have a phone.
I don't think so. Personally, I do a lot of testing. In fact, Susan, you can probably speak to this better. Susan's got a pile of Android devices. What do you use?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, and you know, the emulator works so terribly that you almost have to go to some sort of something to use besides the emulator. And in my experience, if you want to give any speed at all, and so what I've been trying to do is pick up the most frequently used devices, so I have them for testing. So now I have the Galaxy 2 and the Galaxy 3 are very, very hot devices. They're very much in use. If you look at like lists, they're just very, very commonly used. And I picked up the Nexus 7 for Christmas, and I also have an older Galaxy that's a 2.3 device. So it's kind of like a mix of trying to get which actual devices are used a lot, but also trying to pick up devices that are in certain like the 2.3, well, I don't have a 3.0 device, but then the 4.1, the 4.2.
How are you dealing with the contracts on those phones?
You know, I changed my home phone to the Galaxy 3, and the Galaxy 2, when I took it off, they took the home phone off the Galaxy 2, and it works fine as an like an iPod, as just a device without having the phone connected to it. Unlike an iPhone doesn't work very well automatically unless it's actually hooked up as a phone.
Yeah, so the trick there, if you don't want to pay for the monthly stuff on the iPhone, is just run now that the iPhone 5 has come out, it's a little bit different, but the older trick used to be just use an iPod because you don't need a contract.
Yeah.
But the simulators and xcode are way better than the
simulators
and xcode are way better than the simulators.
Yeah, I like to purchase my devices like without contract, so I like to purchase it full price, so I don't have to worry about the monthly fee. So I was trying to figure out which was the best solution.
Yeah,
so the Nexus, yeah.
So go Georgetown.
So I have another question. Previously in the forum, you mentioned, this is regarding the new and the live design, the design mode. Previously in the app delegate, you mentioned, in the section where it says in the old section, it said delete all data, all local data, and we had to add this like false local text file to force it to update. Does that new live and design mode take over, and we don't need that anymore?
You lost me a little bit on the delete all local data. Are you referring to? Let's back up a little bit. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to there.
In the app delegate, I think it's online. Let me see. It's in the old one. Delete all. Around line 700, you have delete previously catch data. This does not remove the config file we just created.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So there's a simple method that I wrote, and let me find it here. It's in the file manager. It's going to be in the file manager. It's not going to be in the delegate. Now the method itself is in the file manager. Right here, delete all local data. Right there.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't. This is just the method. Now the delegate itself fires that when you refresh the app's data. So if you'll notice here, this is probably what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
After you download a new version of your configuration data, the app is just getting rid of all the old data, so nothing's cached anymore. So this is a completely separate topic from design and live.
Okay.
Not related.
Okay, because I did have problems before. when I went from 1.5 and I changed all of my apps to 2.0, some users didn't see the new changes.
Yeah, and of course, there's probably a million different reasons that could be. If the users didn't see the new changes, so I'm thinking that your logic was maybe the old changes weren't being deleted. Is that what you were thinking?
Exactly.
Yeah, so if the old data is not being deleted, which runs in this, let me go back to that line, which is running here, then I guess the only assumption I can make is maybe this download file maybe it never completed.
Okay.
Not sure. It's hard to say. I wonder where the echo's coming from. Not sure. Ian's telling us, hey, on the device question, Target has a 90-day return policy. Nice rental program. Touche. That's a great idea. That's funny. I don't feel like we answered that very well for you. I feel kind of bad, but I'll try to recap what she was saying. She's saying that some users weren't getting her new data. Pretty simple question. So the next question is, how come? So once it downloads the data, this method, download file completed, triggers. And if that downloaded data is valid, right here, if the valid application data, if it's valid, then it deletes everything, and then off it goes with the new set. So I wonder if, well, it wouldn't make sense that it wouldn't be valid config data because some devices got it and some devices didn't. I wonder if those devices just didn't get the new information. I'd be suspect there. Like when you hit refresh, what's happening? Is it not getting the new file? Hard to say. Good question, though. And those things are always tricky. One of the things that we struggle with is because this is flexible and because you don't have to have, a remote file in your data URL, and because of all the different options, you also end up with a bunch of different situations which are hard to solve. The best bet is just to run your app and watch the console and see where it's failing. But in her case, she's got devices in the wild where some are getting the new information and some are not. And I would be, if some are and some aren't, then clearly there's nothing wrong with your project. I would just go to that device and say, why is that device not getting the new stuff? So, tough one. My Georgetown reference, by the way, was a little inside joke. Okay, so we made a menu with image adjustment. That was fun. We talked about that weird xcode 4.2 situation. Niraj, we got, Chris had a couple good comments. Do we have any more comments in there? Sherry hasn't said anything. I wonder if she's not actually with us. Her little yellow thing there suggests that maybe she's not. Are you with us, Sherry? Maybe not. She's always got good questions to ask. That's why I'm asking. Oh, well.
Hey, David.
Yes, sir.
Chris just sent me a message, said he had to switch computers, but he has the answer to the 4.2 question.
Yay, let's hear it. Oh, he switched computers so we can't hear him.
I just unmuted.
There we go.
Chris.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We can. Ninja.
You got me now, David?
Yes, sir. You can't hear us, maybe.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Hello. Chris, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
I compiled it. I can hear you. You can hear me?
We can hear you too.
Yes.
Weird.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Maybe send him a message, Warren, in the chat window.
Okay. Okay. I just got a pop-up on here saying that you might not be able to hear me because of network something or other. All right.
Okay, Chris.
Okay.
We'll try this one more
All
time.
right.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. I compiled with 4.2 on one of the new apps, and I get the semantic error use of undeclared identifier NSURL is excluded from backup key, which I think is what you were expecting.
That's exactly what I was expecting. So it's a, I'm writing this down so I can do a little digging. It's a semantic error.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
For the NS URL is excluded from backup key.
Yep. And that is line.
And
I know right where that's going to be. It's going to be on line number 129.
And when you delete that whole method, it does compile all the way through.
Okay, perfect. So that'll fix their projects, which is, you know, as far as the errors go, but it won't fix the overall problem. They won't be able to exclude their stuff from iCloud. You know what I'm saying? Because, and that's the new requirement that Apple has, and so they're in a little bit of a quandary. So one possibility is they submit and everything's fine and nobody notices, which has literally happened thousands and thousands of times, right? I mean, very rarely do they. It's weird how inconsistent they are. And so they could do that. On the other hand, they may get a rejection, in which case they'd be stuck. They'd have to figure out a new solution, which is kind of bogus. And so that's interesting too, because depending on where the data is being saved, you see this variable up here now, where is data being saved? Documents, caches, or temp directory. If they didn't have 4.5 and they couldn't exclude it from iCloud, in theory, they could save these files in the temporary directory instead of the documents directory, and that would satisfy Apple, but that would mean that their cached data for their app would be deleted on iOS's whim. You know, iOS manages the temporary directory, and so who knows when that stuff would be deleted, and you wouldn't have predictable offline use, if that makes any sense at all. But iOS does not back up from the temporary directory, so they'd be solving that problem. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Can I stack another question on top of that then?
Yeah, sure.
For all the people that have existing 1.5 apps out there, if they do just a simple change a couple, you know, include files or pictures or something like that and resubmit, do they run the same risk?
I'm absolutely certain that they do, right? And there's lots of questions on that, because remember, some of these apps now in the App Store are 3 or 4 years old, and lots of them. And this is an interesting question that if I ever had a day in the Apple review, you know, secret layer, that'd be the top of my list. What do you do with these old apps? Because on one hand, they're not kicking them out of the store right now, but we all know that they don't support the newest devices. How could they? But on the other hand, as soon as you submit them for, it's almost as if they take the opportunity to reject you when you submit your next one, if that makes any sense. And that's the only logic I can think of. But
they might look at the number of sales and see if it's still selling well. They might not reject it.
No, totally. I think you're exactly right. And like I've always complained about in the past, depending on your status, you know, if you're a big time, you know, firm or partner of theirs, then yeah, they're pretty nice to you. But you know, mortal developers like us, you know, all of us individuals, it's a completely different set of rules, it appears, and I've always struggled with that. But no, that's a wonderful question. And in theory, what they could do, though, well, they couldn't do it because 1.5, I don't think 1.5 uses. Actually, I think 1.5 does, but 1.4 certainly doesn't. 1.5, they could just replace this file manager file, and it should compile fine, and just use the updated file manager. I don't think there's any new methods in it or anything like that. So that could work. I'm going to change pace real fast. My SPS is asking, in the future, will we have webinars for simple games? I'd love to do a webinar for a simple game. That's a great idea. We should get Warren to take note of that and add it, you know, to the list that we have. I think that's probably a 2-part thing, but we could do, you know, I think I did a bug smash little thing, but there's some fundamentals in gaming. Like if you wanted to make a game screen, there's some fundamentals that kind of span all the different types of games, right? Like how to keep track of the score and the high scores and the user's progress and all those kinds of things that are kind of generic. And we could do one webinar maybe called like setting up a gaming environment and another one like setting up a game screen. And I say that in very, very loose terms. If you're referring to simple games but really mean complex games with crazy 2D graphics and all that kind of stuff, which some people would call simple, that would be more like a webinar series. and it would take many, many hours of episodes to actually teach anything like that. I'm kind of waiting for somebody to submit something like that to the plugin market, and I think it's not too long. But things like Hangman and Word Match and, you know, Tic-Tac-Toe and, you know, Concentration and some of those classic little puzzle games, they're fun and easy to make. So we could totally do that. That's a great idea. I love that. So back to Chris's thing, yeah, that's an interesting conversation to have in terms of what happens with, you know, old apps.
Let me keep on going on that question then.
Yep.
Let me keep going on that question, David.
Yeah, I can hear you.
In the 1.5 days, you had a change log where you would update that. Is there such thing published on your website for the 2.0?
There's not, and I'm horribly guilty for that. No, there's not. One thing that we've been trying to do, in fact, let me show you something in the control panel that you guys may not even realize. In core now, not in core, I'm sorry, in published changes now, this is related to the live and design, you get to control the version now that you see in your control panel. So like when I go to my apps, the version that you see this says 2.1 here, David Debug. That's up to me to control now, which is kind of cool. And the reason we did that is we don't want the world out there as we move into 2013 to be too worried about, you know, what version of Buzztouch are you running? It's just a Buzztouch project. And so there are some problems with that approach, but that's kind of what we'd like to do. So in that, the logical question is like what was the date or the build version of the code that I'm running? And so I do think that users deserve a better, more organized way to know what they got. And I think the way to do that is maybe in the delegate or in the README. We can inject that right at the top, you know, 2.0 for iOS, and we should probably take this out because maybe theirs is version 2.7 or whatever they changed. But I totally agree with that. And the fundamental problem with juggling all of this is we never really know what they've done to their project, right? Almost everybody makes a change after they download their code, so it's like, you know, what they're running with, it's kind of hard to say. And so maybe the core file has a version number or something, right? Maybe this folder's called BT Core, you know, 2.3 or something like that. That might be a good approach. And everything inside the core file could be versioned, but everything outside the core file is not. I like that idea. We should definitely revisit that.
I would still, David.
Go ahead.
I would still suggest maybe on the website somewhere, because if I had a project that I downloaded a month ago and I just kept on working and working and working on it, and all of a sudden, you know, something changed, you know, 2 weeks ago, I would have never known that if I just kept on working on this one, and it might be something that I wanted to have included in there.
Yeah, you're totally right. And like I said, the end users do deserve that, and we just haven't done it. And so, you know, add it to the list, right? We should absolutely do that. And that goes along with documenting all this stuff too, right? One of the things that, in the place where that should be is in the documentation. We've got that 1.5 kind of documentation cheat sheet that, you know, is useful, but it needs to go away. This just doesn't even apply anymore. And we just need to recreate this, and, you know, having you and a bunch of others on our team now should allow us to do that much, much faster. And in the documentation, it should say right on the top, you know, these are the files that have changed recently. Absolutely. Totally agree. Would it make sense to comment out, Ian's saying, would it make sense to comment out that code in Xcode 4.2 so users can at least compile to get used to Buzztouch, then know best if they want to upgrade their Mac? I think what Ian's saying is, should we comment out that code on the download server so that no one gets it? That's a good question and an interesting approach. It might not be a bad idea. Let's unpack the pros and cons of that. If we, on our end, commented out, excuse me, this code that we know will break on 4.2, the pro of that would be it wouldn't break on 4.2 or 4.5. The con of that is going to be people are going to get rejected if they're not backing up to iCloud unless they understand to uncomment that. Interesting question. We'll have to visit that outside of this webinar and kind of make a global decision. Yeah. I'm of the mind. Go ahead.
Okay, David, it's Ian.
Oh, hi, Ian.
Hey, I guess what I meant was when we're in the forums and those questions come up, we can suggest to them to go into their project, comment out that code, and then they can at least continue working on their project. You know, get used to things.
Yeah, totally. So I misunderstood what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely, that makes sense when you're having a discussion with on a case by case basis. I thought you were, you know, overall or whatever.
Yeah, if they're new users and want to get used to the thing, don't want to go buy a Mac yet, but I can at least just suggest. You know.
Yeah, I hear you. That's
cool.
That absolutely. And so, and there's a lot of those weird little intricacies. You know, somebody was in the forum a week or so ago that had something with iAds or whatever. There's so many weird little, you know, overall in volume we're doing pretty good, but there are always edge cases where something's odd about their machine. So, I mean, in a perfect world, we would know exactly what machine they were running, and we just don't. So, yeah, good idea. Great idea. But Warren, why don't we, I don't see any more questions unless somebody's got a last minute thing. We got a couple minutes. I was going to say, let's wrap this up, but anybody want to throw something else out?
Well, I'll just I'll throw this at you. Greetings from Kristen Britz, who's down in Australia, who says, loving the Q&A on the beach. Hopes to watch the rest on YouTube later.
So tell Kristen, and where did he post that?
I don't know. I guess he was on the beach when he posted it.
Well, I mean, is he in the meeting right now?
Yeah. Well, I say he is. Let me check again.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't have the whole name list, so cool. Awesome. Way to go, Kristen. I'm jealous. You guys probably haven't heard much of... I haven't been programming much from the boat lately. You know, I've been going down to the boat and using it as an office, but I just haven't been able to do it. It's just been pouring down rain for so long here in town, and I'm not complaining about that, but it is a little bit weird to be, you know, terrestrial in an office every day. I'm just not good at that. But anyways, so Kristen, he's a super cool guy. You guys would recognize him in the forum right away. He participates a lot. But
that's KD.
Yeah, so thanks you guys for, you know, listening and paying attention and participating. I always appreciate it. And I look forward to our next little hangout. Those are always fun, interesting questions. And just know that when you ask questions in these Q&As, you're helping a lot of people, not just you. And so we gotta get those genuine things. Niraj, that was a fun way to explore that. You know, how do we change that menu image? That's awesome. And MySPS, those are great questions about you know, the device and stuff. That's awesome. So keep it coming. And I'm gonna say goodnight. But Warren, why don't you wrap us up?
All right, David. Well, as always, thank you very much for your expertise and sharing with us, and a great group of questions. I tried my best to write them down, so we've got some time markers here when this video gets posted, and this one will be available for members and guests as well. Hopefully we'll have that posted within the next 24 hours for everybody to review. We do have a new user welcome to Buzztouch webinar scheduled for this Sunday. So just kind of encourage newbies as you see them pop up. We hope to get them off, hit the ground running and be very comfortable in our forum. And we're going to start having bi-weekly new user welcomes for those people. And again, the first one is this coming Sunday night, and then we've got webinars scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday. So check it out on the forum and see what your next topic is. And with that, everybody have a great evening.
Awesome. Good night, my friend. Bye, guys.
Good night.